Okay. Let's call this meeting to order, please. Roll call.
Councilmember Chang? Here. Councilmember Davies? Councilmember Smith?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Power?
Yes.
And Mayor Pogencourt? Here.
Yes.
Councilmember Davies is absent today. Thank you.
Okay. Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Jeanette will lead us in the pledge.
Put your hand over your heart, please. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Audience communication. Do we have any?
Nothing, Rich.
Nothing? Nope. Consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered to be routine and non-controversial by city staff. Consent items will be considered first and may be approved by one motion if no member of the council or audience wishes to comment or ask questions. If comment or discussion is desired by anyone, the item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered in listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the city council concerning the item before action is taken. Staff recommendations are shown in caps. Okay. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda, or do I have any public comment first?
Ask if the public wants to
Right.
remove anything from the consent agenda.
Would anybody in our public like to remove any item from the consent agenda? No? Council?
No.
Okay.
Motion to approve consent as presented.
Second.
Councilmember Chung?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Power?
Yes.
Mayor Pogencourt?
Yes.
4-0 vote, motion carried.
Okay, no public comment. Can we have city manager, finance director reports? Hamid, sounds like you're on, kiddo.
We'll start with the next item, which is actually the approval of a memorandum of understanding between the City of Tehachapi and the Tehachapi Police Officers Association. So we have successfully negotiated terms for a new MOU to ensure fair compensation and benefits for our police officers while maintaining fiscal responsibility for the city. This MOU includes salary increases, differential pay adjustments, and a new longevity pay structure to support retention and acknowledge tenure within the department. And a lot of this goes back to 2022 when the voters supported the Passenger Measure S, the 1 cent sales tax initiative, with priorities centered around supporting local public safety, including the Tehachapi Police Department. The MOU proposed tonight speaks to that priority with a new agreement to ensure continued support of our men and women in uniform. So the last MOU we had with the TPOA was a 5-year agreement signed in 2019. We were negotiating last year. Those negotiations stalled because we had some promotions of the bargaining team that actually promoted into leadership roles. And so we kind of had to start from square one, so it was tough to do so before last year's budget. And so in good faith gesture, we continued to supply the TPOA with their cost of living adjustment and a few other minor provisions requested for some operational efficiency. Since then, the staff and members of the bargaining unit were able to have a pair of efficient meetings to discuss common ground proposals presented by both sides. I'd like to thank the bargaining unit from TPOA for the professionalism and willingness to negotiate. This was a very smooth process. I've had others in the past weren't so smooth, but we really weren't far apart when we came to the table and said, this is what we're looking to offer, and they said, this is what we're looking to receive. So it worked out really well. So some of the main points of this MOU, it's a 3-year agreement from fiscal year 2025 through 2028. So in year 1, it'll be a 5% salary increase, and then we will have an either or option for the next 2 years. So either another 5% in the next fiscal year or the cost of living adjustment, whichever is higher. And the same goes for 27 and 28. We'll go with the higher option there. We did add an additional $1 an hour for officers working night shifts that are regularly scheduled from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. This helps with really just the fact that it's tough to work nights and they're impacting lives, so this is a little bit of an offset for that. This item, along with the longevity pay, we selected and they were okay with going with a flat rate instead of a percentage. In the past, there are percentages, and that's all based on what an officer is paid, And that gets tricky from the budget standpoint. It's very tricky for payroll sometimes to figure that out. But for us, as we'll find out later in this meeting, this helps us budget out 5 years a lot easier to know, okay, we have this many night shifts in the next fiscal year, we can expect to pay this much. And the same goes for the longevity pay. This was a structure that we sort of borrowed. It's very similar to the Bakersfield Police Department. And so what it is, it's a flat rate year of service award after 5, 10, 15, and 20 years. But there are also some qualifications as well. This is not just, you've been here for 5 or 10 years, here's your money, but you also have to be a good standing officer within the department, satisfactory or above on your performance evaluation, and no retroactive bonuses as well. So, unfortunately, if somebody, is on year 6 right now, they're not gonna get paid their 5-year bonus. They have to wait till year 10 to receive their 10-year bonus. So no retroactive payments there. And then employees also have to work at least 1,040 regular hours, including those designated by the chief in the year preceding. Those folks will, if they don't work those hours, they'll still qualify for those payments, but they'll be delayed until the next year when they actually meet those requirements. And so again, the flat one-time payment following their anniversary date made it much easier for budgeting in the future, understanding what we have, who we have in that pipeline, so to speak, right now, when we can expect those payouts. So it's much easier to do it this way. So for the fiscal impact on this, the salary increases, night shift differential, longevity pay structure will have budgetary impacts on the city's general fund. But we reviewed the projections and determined the adjustments are sustainable within our expected revenues for the term of this agreement. And it's basically designed to fairly compensate our officers while ensuring financial stability for the city. It's getting better, at least in our case. Chief can attest to this as far as recruitment and retention goes. But we're seeing around us, with whether it's a small police department in the unincorporated area, sheriff's department, it's hard to keep people sometimes. And so, and not all of them are looking for more money, so to speak, but we try to balance that out between their work environment, their workload, and the compensation as well. We've done a really good job under Chief Standridge's leadership to get our department back to full staff. And so we hope this will continue to keep that, so we're not paying to constantly send new folks to an academy, or the cost of training and lateral transfers and that sort of thing, advertising and all that. So really happy with the way this proposal came out. So the recommendation today will, this will obviously provide well-deserved benefits for the Tehachapi Police Officers Association members, and we recommend the adoption of the MOU between the city and the Tehachapi Police Officers Association for a 3-year term, covering fiscal years 2025 to 2028. Authorize the mayor and city manager to sign or amend pending review by CalPERS. Normally we sent this to PERS before, but we were getting we think it's fine, but we're getting a little close to the deadline here for this meeting, and we wanted to get this approved prior to the budget. So we're just making sure that sometimes the language, PERS likes to change language to make sure that the retirement is proper and everything. So we do have the ability, we'd like the ability to make some minor amendments, and obviously with the blessing of the TPOA as well, before signing. So in case PERS comes back with something that you want a minor revision, we don't want to necessarily have to take this back to council. It's not going to change the financial piece at all. So that's my recommendation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do I have any questions from the public?
Is this on?
No. Yes.
No, it's not green. Okay, hi, Claudia Elliott. So I just wanted to check my math with you guys. Because in your report, and you kind of elaborated more, but you said, yeah, it's going to cost a lot of money, but we think we got that, sort of.
No, we have it.
You have it?
We have it.
Yeah, I know you do. So it looks to me like this is a 38% increase in police personnel expense over last year. And also that you're going to eat up, if you will, 76% of your projected sales tax is going to cover the police department? Are those numbers about right?
Not specific to this MOU, but if you're talking about broad overall costs.
Broad overall.
Then, yeah.
I went to your charts
Yeah.
and last year's
Yeah,
charts.
Our sales tax is
So,
about 9 million, and PD's costs are about 7 million, so it's probably about 70%.
Okay. So a year ago, your presentation showed 27% of general fund expenditures to the police department, and this year 38%. So, okay.
And that's staffing and equipment, and it's
Right.
not just staffing.
Okay. And so what I was gonna ask is, do you need to do this, but you said for retention, was that the bottom line? So,
Retention, recruitment as well.
Right.
You know, and there's, I think we've got all the other pieces as far as work environment, workload. We've had, people have come here from larger agencies because frankly, they are tired of getting shot at, so they come here. But I think they're getting, you know, they're getting plenty of work, and this is an opportunity for them to be fairly compensated. We're not top of the scale, we're not bottom of the scale, we're kind of in the middle. You know, we can't compete with some of the top of the scale folks, whether it's a larger agency. But for a small city department, I think we're right where we need to be as far as compensation.
yeah, so 5 years ago, your budget showed 27 positions, and now it shows 34. And I'm just, as a citizen, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of cop cars, every time there's anything.
That's not all police personnel, the 34.
Oh, well, that's in the budget, that's what your numbers say.
Well, dispatch, that includes dispatch,
Yeah.
that includes code enforcement, which some are and aren't.
But so did the
Susan.
27.
Correct, records clerk included that as well.
5 years ago, 27 on your little chart, now
Yeah.
34, so.
Yeah.
I'm not arguing against it, I just wanna make sure I have my numbers right, so. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Council?
There's also the cost of living allowance that's in there as well, correct?
Yes, yeah, and that cost of living adjustments, which before that last MOU was signed, we had, or I would say in that period of last MOU, we had 2 or 3 6% COLA adjustments. Back to back 6%, so there's 12% right there in just cost of living adjustments, and then a few other, I think we had like a 1 and some change after that. So, so anyway, yes, those were projected in the increases as well.
Okay, any other?
Going on top of Claudia's, Elliott's question, I had a question. What is our turnover, just in general? Pretty good? In other words, some agencies are just a clearinghouse for getting people through the academy. They get into a department for a year and then they transfer out. It sounds like ours is fairly stable. If you
We
could
have
address
not,
that.
since I've been here in the 2 years, we have not had that. We lost one to the Kern County Sheriff's Department who actually no longer wanted to be a patrol officer and was given the opportunity to be a background investigator, which is great. We lost another one to the Kern County Sheriff's Department. And it's like we talked about earlier, when you have agencies that are giving people $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 bonuses, we don't. And so you have to compete against those things, and you have to make our salaries competitive. Yeah, we have a great, fantastic quality of life, but you have to give people a reason other than that to work here. I mean, the job is what it is. It's 24/7, 365. And what a lot of folks don't take into consideration is Tehachapi has a population roughly 14,000, 15,000, but we also service about 40,000. We take care of Stallion Springs, we take care of Keene, Cal City, Mojave, and everybody who comes here to shop and enjoy events here. So our population increases very huge for a department our size and the amount of calls for service and things that we have. So, I mean, we're a very active department. I'm very proud of it. I think the taxpayers are getting exactly what they are paying for. And I look forward to this new year. But as far as right now, currently our staffing, we have only one vacant position in patrol. And that position is not being filled at this time. We're waiting to see if a lateral candidate or somebody comes in. But we have 2 in the academy, and both local, and they're doing good. They're in week 3. And then we have the 2 that have just gotten out of the academy, and they're both now off of field training and providing service to the citizens. So our staffing is fantastic. When I got here, we were down, I think, 5 or 7, and we were down 7 dispatchers. Right now, we're currently down 1 dispatcher. So we're moving forward, and that's part of why you probably see some increase as well, as we are actually now getting fully staffed, which in turn is driving costs up that in the past were savings, but now we're putting, you know, those people out providing service both internal and external. So.
And the department goes through cycles as well. I know when we started this department, pretty much everybody was a retiree from a previous organization.
Yeah.
And some of that was good, some of that was bad. Then you had sometimes that folks just came here because they were retired and this was an easy gig, quote unquote, for them in a different retirement system. But that's all gone now. We probably have, at least in the history of this department, the most balanced department we've ever had, where we've got some senior officers and some leadership with a lot of experience, bringing in some young, recruits and cadets, but not the whole, not everybody's fresh out of the academy anymore. So it's a very good balance. I think it's matured to that point where we have a great balance of staff.
And if I can, let me clarify. I think I misspoke or would be misunderstood. We're not providing police services to the outer areas. We are talking about their population comes into the city limits, and thus they shop, they drive, they attend
Drop their kids
events
off at high
and
school.
things like that. Their kids go to school here, so it's an increase. So we provide service to the greater Tehachapi area when they come into the city limits, which at any given time can double and triple our population. So that's kind of what I was getting at.
Thank you for clarifying that.
I did, because I think I went back and thought about it, and it sounded like we're actually going out to Stallion. No,
No.
it's they're coming into the city, and we provide service. When they're here, they're ours, just like everybody else.
And reading the article or reading the MOU, it sounds like seniority is also based on how many years you've spent here in Tehachapi, which should help with longevity. Is that correct?
Correct. That's kind of the goal, is to get our folks back up to where they're staying here. Our department right now is super young. My lieutenants are both, one has been here 17, 18 years, which is Lieutenant Dunham. As a sergeant, he was here quite a while. Lieutenant Rupert has not. He came with some experience from, LA County Sheriff, but he realistically is still a young lieutenant. We have young sergeants. We have a young senior officer. Our patrol officers are really young. So by helping provide a longevity pay, it gives people an incentive to stay and to really develop their skills and benefit the city of Tehachapi. My goal when I came here as chief, and I made that commitment to Greg, and we're trying our best to fulfill that, is to promote within. Since the inception of that department, you've went out and got 3 police chiefs, which, hey, I'm grateful, I'm benefiting from it. But at some point that needs to end, at least for a while, to the benefit of the department. You want people who are going to develop and say, hey, one day I can sit at the end of that hall and implement some of the ideas and thoughts I have based on my growth and my maturity here and my experience in this city. And every now and then it's okay to go outside for chief, but you're not going to be able to sustain a department that does that its entire time, because everybody in below is going to feel that they can only get to a certain level and they're done. And so my goal is to get folks ready for the next level, and we're already looking down the line. I'm already looking down at my sergeants and my senior officer and my detective and my lieutenants and saying, okay, if I promote somebody to sergeant, do I see him as a lieutenant? If I promote somebody to senior, do I see them as a sergeant? Do I see them as a lieutenant? Who do I see maybe taking my position one day? We are developing a succession planning in this department, and these are the tools that are going to help us do that. A high turnover is not good for anybody.
No. How many officers do you have on the street at any given time?
It varies depending upon the shift. We try to go no less than 2 to 3 with a supervisor. Day shift always has more because you have your administrative staff here, which I would technically count. My lieutenants would count if we had a catastrophic incident, respond to calls. Our school resource officer is here. Our detective is here, but they all bounce around to different shifts. Generally, your day shift has the most people, and then at night, we usually run at 2 to 3 and a supervisor.
2 to 3 plus a supervisor.
Plus a supervisor. We try to.
4 sworn.
Yeah, it doesn't always happen, but yes.
But that's the most we've had since I've lived here. I mean, when we started out a long time ago. Do you get any feedback from the public as far as coverage? I mean,
they seem to be pretty happy with it. We get the calls quickly. I don't get any complaints, I will tell you that.
when you're
So
not getting
That's
complaints,
better.
you're usually doing pretty good. So,
yeah, if the biggest thing that our folks are complaining about right now is they got a speeding ticket or a stop sign ticket or I'll take that all day long. It's, you know, but as far as how we're out handling calls, we're making arrests, we're stopping DUIs, we're keeping the streets safe. We've got officers to training through our increased budget that they haven't been able to get to in the past. I have officers who are, you know, we're gonna award 2 of them at the Mothers Against Drunk Driving Awards next week. One of them had over 39 DUIs last year. I think he's already on pace to have more than that this year. Another one of them had, I can't remember if it was 9 or 19, and then would have had more than that, but we moved him to school resource officer. So they are out performing and doing what the taxpayers are paying them to do.
Thank you, Chief.
Tehachapi, I'm sorry, Phil, if I can, one more. Tehachapi has a certain lifestyle they want to live. And in order to live that, we need to provide them the police service that they want. And that's my goal.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Get
I
another
have
question
a
over here.
comment.
I just have one more sort of
Okay.
clarification, because it's something that you said. Claudia Elliott again, this might be for you, Mr. Jones. So you mentioned not being fully staffed. And so when I'm comparing, because I want to be fair, when I'm comparing what last year's budget said to what this year's budget said, how do you handle salary savings and budgeting? Do you kind of like take it off the top or catch up later?
Sure, so we always start the budget with what we think, you know, we're gonna budget conservatively, so we will probably have all of the positions, even vacant positions, budgeted for the year. Unless it's something that we don't see that's gonna be filled for another 6 months or so, then maybe we'll budget for half a year. But most of the time, we are budgeting for the full year. When we get to mid-year then, and we then try to do an adjustment to see
Right.
based on, okay.
What's really
it's-
happening.
Yes,
Right.
it has been vacant for 6 months or not. And
So if I
you'll see
compare
some
budget beginning to budget beginning, I'm being fair?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
thanks.
Okay,
I have a comment.
okay.
So, you know, first of all, thank you, Corey. I was gonna ask you, with these agreed package, where are we standing? Because we do know that it is hard to find a good officers, and retaining them is very challenging because they will move. They'll go elsewhere when there is a higher compensation.
We could be the second highest paid today, and then tomorrow someone else gets a new MOU,
Yes.
and all of a sudden we're third.
Right.
This is how it works, it's so quick.
Exactly, especially nowadays that police officers are very scarce, and they're hard, the good ones are hard to find, and, you know, another thing is the keeping it. So I understand the incentives and the longevity, the bonus and whatnot. And this is the perfect example of Measure 8 tax money that we're collecting. The people from Stallion Springs and Sand Canyons and Cal City, they come here, they shop at Walmart or any grocery stores. They pay their share of, I don't think it's enough, however, they do pay that extra, you know, the sales tax. And so with that, the Measure 8, because of that, we are able to provide more safety to our residents. And me as one of the residents, and I do appreciate the, you know, officers' effort, and which is very important. And you know, one, you know, hard thing is, one last thing that I would like to commend is having a good officer, well-qualified officer, their longevity is so important because they know the community, and they're more efficient, and they, you know, for them to be able to go out and take care of the issues or whatever, it's way more efficient for people who are more experienced and lived here or, you know, served for the city longer. So, and I think if this is what it takes for us to be able to hire good officers and be able to retain, and I think it's a good measure. That's it.
That's it? Okay, since it's a recommendation, do I need a motion?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve as stated.
I'll second it.
Councilmember Chang?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Power?
Yes.
Mayor Polkencourt?
Yes.
4-0 vote, motion carried.
Okay. All All right, then we have our 5-year budget coming
Now
up.
our 5-year budget.
Yeah.
Give us just a moment
Just
while
one
we
Oh.
get some.
We're gonna put on that computers.
It's a huge fun.
We need to increase that technology budget.
Yeah.
Too late.
You cut my second HDMI cord.
Yeah, we got.
That was a part of the Measure S.
There we go, okay. So I'm gonna start, Greg is not here today, but I'm gonna start with a statement that he wanted me to read regarding this budget and the thought process that went into this budget, and then I'll let him take over the fun stuff. So I'm proud to present to council once again for approval this balanced budget, which covers all general fund revenues and expenditures, along with enterprise funds managed by the city. The mentality of this budget cycle, which includes an operating budget for the 2025-26 fiscal year and a projected tentative budget through 29-30, was to consider those outside factors such as economic conditions and impacts that could have on our municipal operations. For example, the State Legislative Analyst's Office recently reported the state budget shortfalls will become increasingly difficult to resolve over time due to reliance on a dwindling number of available one-time solutions. As part of that, the LAO's office is forecasting persistent future deficits for the state of $10 to $20 billion in each of the next several years. Recently, the governor's made budget revision included cuts to address a $20 billion shortfall. So in the past, the states looked to municipalities to cover their shortages, including removing redevelopment agency funding in 2011, delaying payments and reimbursements to local governments for state-mandated programs and grants, and withholding portions of sales and property taxes to plug budget holes. Additionally, inflation, short-term impacts from federal economic policies, and other challenges can impact our long-term projections. With those concerns in mind, this budget was created conservatively from anticipated revenues to expenses. While we always seek a balanced budget, certain other deferrals were made in this cycle until the impact of state and federal economies were stabilized. The economy has a trickle-down impact from large corporations and small businesses to the spending decisions made in your homes as a result. The budget that will be presented today reflects that mindset as we continue to invest in priorities laid out by the voters in 2022 when Measure S was approved. Those include public safety and infrastructure, as we inch closer to full cost recovery model with the Kern County Fire Department and the investments in our local police department. We need to ensure that those costs do not exceed the best practice of 50% of general fund expenditures. This is a long supported practice by fiscally responsible municipalities. We will adjust as needed in the future to ensure that stability. I would like to thank city staff and department heads for proposing this budget and their openness to adjusting as necessary to ensure that this budget is not only balanced, but as you will see, continues to support strong operating reserves and a cash balance. With that, I'll hand it over to Ahmed Jones, our finance director.
Thank you, Corey. Mayor Totencourt, council members. Before I begin, I just want to kind of describe the process a little bit. We started this budget season back in January. We first worked on our mid-year budget, brought that to council in March for approval. And then we continued on working on our 5-year budget and to where we are today. So I just want to thank all the staff and departments for meeting our deadlines that we have in finance to get here to this point. All right, so we'll begin the 5-year budget presentation. And we start just kind of overall citywide, looking at our expenditures and things to keep in mind as we go through the budget. This may be familiar to you. It's the same slide we've had, I think, for the last several years in the budget. That's just kind of, again, one of the main cost drivers in our budget is the fire contract. When we got the new contract in place a few years ago, you can see here over 6 years there were significant increases. The total contract cost, when you include our property tax revenue, as well as the extra payment that needs to come from our general fund, out in 27-28 is all the way near 2.3 million. You can see that our property tax portion of that is just kind of has a little 5% escalator built in. But the difference in that yellow row, that's the extra amount that has to come from the city's general fund. And so back in 21-22, that amount was only $18,000, and then it jumped to $196,000, and then all the way up to nearly 1.3 million annually that has to come out of the general fund budget. And so that was primarily a driver for Measure S. The city needed some additional revenue to be able to afford the fire contract. Do want to point out then, so you can see there's some large increases, 221% on the contract cost over 6 years, 6,700% on that general fund portion. And then at some point, I believe over the next year, we hope that negotiations will begin for the next contract starting in fiscal year 28-29. Something else to consider is the city continues to have some subsidies that the general fund covers. So the airport is not self-sufficient. There is a deficit each year for its operating costs, and so you can see that in the first row. There's also been several capital projects in the airport, and so fortunately we do receive a 90% federal grant, another 4.5% state grants on those, but the city general fund does have to pitch in 5.5% of those project costs. We added the transit fare box ratio. So for the transit fund, we are required to have a 10% fare box recovery ratio. The city has not been able to meet that, and so the general fund then subsidizes to cover that requirement. And then finally, our landscape and lighting districts. And so we continue to have 500,000 and growing to cover all of the expenses to maintain all of our landscape and lighting districts. We try to recover as much as we can through the property tax levy, but unfortunately we cannot get a full recovery, and so the general fund kicks in for the rest. Insurance premiums continue to increase each year. Our workers' comp, we're estimating about an 8% increase in our rates. The all other insurances, that's our property insurance, liability insurance, cyber insurance, those continue to go up every year. And then our health insurance, we're estimating about a 10% increase this year. However, I do want to point out, you can see in the future years in 26, 27 and beyond, that number is staying flat. The city does provide a contribution up to a certain amount to cover medical insurance, but we, at this point, we will not continue to increase that contribution. We are holding that contribution flat, and so the increases in those health premiums will go on to the employees. And then we kind of go into some of our major expenses in 25-26. So starting with some of the capital projects, we have the Transit Center sidewalk connection, $643,000. Valley Mill gap closure. That one, as well as the Tucker and Highline roundabout, those are multi-year projects. So, for instance, that $200,000 and the $572,000, that's really for engineering and design costs. Then there are significantly higher expenditures budgeted in 26-27 for both of those projects. And then continuing on, there's just other capital projects, lots of street rehab, pedestrian improvements, all the way down to the airport runway rehab project next year.
What's the, can we ask questions as
Sure.
we go?
Yeah,
It might be
absolutely.
easier to try to come back.
Sure.
Like the gap closure, what is that exactly? Is that a project at Valley and Mill, like for sidewalks? Probably?
I'd have to defer to.
Curb and gutter sidewalks where we don't have them?
Yeah, that project involves putting only sidewalks on Mill Street from Tehachapi Boulevard to Valley Boulevard. So sidewalks the entire length, as well as on the north side of Valley from Curry to Mountain View, basically. Yeah.
Put in the curb and gutter and where we don't have it.
Curb gutter sidewalk.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
And then continuing on, a few more capital projects, the airport land use compatibility plan update, rock pile improvement, industrial parkway drainage improvement. And then you get into some of the capital outlay expenditures, a lot of vehicles and equipment, some one-time purchases there for general government, police, and public works. Continuing on to our water and wastewater funds, we have banked water. In the event that that water is available, we've been budgeting $250,000 each year. We do have a large capital project in the water fund for the Snyder Mojave Wells transmission lines, $850,000, and then some water improvements. Most of that $610,000, $500,000 is for some pressure zone boundaries. And then you have some equipment, trucks and equipment within water and sewer, along with the sewer biosolids handling system.
On the, like the Snyder Mojave, the 850,000, so our fund is sufficient to cover that?
It will be. So right now, the water fund, thankfully due to the water rates, we will get there as far as having sufficient funds to kind of balance out in the long run. But this was a capital project that I believe needed to be done sooner rather than later.
Yeah. But we're not going into deficit spending because of that project on that
Correct.
account?
Correct.
Okay.
And this is just a snapshot of overall revenue budget for the city, just over 36 million, and 50% of that coming from the general fund, and then followed by the enterprise funds of water, sewer, and refuse, and we get to the capital projects and other special capital funds. This is the same number, but in a pie chart, so you can just kind of get maybe a visual picture of those percentages and the different revenue sources. On the expenditure side, 36.8 million. The biggest component of that is general fund at about 48%, and then followed by the water fund with some of that, with that large capital project. Then you have all the capital projects planned for next fiscal year, and then followed by sewer, refuse, and the other special revenue funds. Same number, but in a pie chart form. And then here's the expenditure budget, 36.8 million, but divided into expenditure categories of capital outlay at 18%, personnel costs at 38%, and then operating expenses at 44%. A snapshot of our personnel budget for next year. So for the cost of living adjustments, for the unrepresented as well as the public works represented employees with their prior MOU, they use an index for the LA area, and using the November CPI, that percentage is 3.2%. And then as was just approved in the police MOU, the represented employees there will have a 5% salary adjustment. As far as new positions in the budget, there are 2 new full-time positions in wastewater, and those are utility maintenance technicians. Those were also factored into the wastewater rate studies previously approved by council.
I have a question.
Sure.
So this 87, the current full-time employees, are they, is that the current number? Because a lot of times we just count the position that is budgeted this year versus is that actual number?
That is that would be the authorized positions as of the new year budget.
Yeah, that's what
I
I
think
thought.
we had a similar table last year, and I think there was a little bit of confusion because we had the actual numbers, and that included then at that moment in time who was there, and
Right.
so it didn't include the vacant positions, and
So this one is authorized?
Correct.
Not necessarily actual filled
correct. We do
position
have
number,
some
okay.
vacant positions currently, but that is authorized in the budget, and then this way you can see then what is the growth between what was authorized at the mid-year and then what is authorized in 25-26 and going forward.
I think the Tory was counted twice.
But
One
then,
in full-time, one in part-time, elected. Yeah? Technically.
I will double check that.
Because the elected is 7, and I believe that admin, if it's 8, is 8. So you probably want to eliminate in the future your, the line, a separate line item.
We'll double check that.
Yeah.
On the part-time, are those typically the summer time, or is that overall the year we have a running 11 people part-time?
Correct. We typically for part-time will budget 1,000 hours per part-time employee.
I see.
And so that's, we do have one new part-time position, that's the part-time police records clerk for the police department. And then something that we are adding this year, we have, in 25-26 only, we added an intern. There is a program that we joined with Current Economic Development Foundation, where they have an 8-week program, so that would be 320 hours. They will reimburse the city for 50% of that. And so the net effect in the budget is that there is 160 hours that we would be paying an intern. So that is new and built into the budget. All right, now we'll get into the general fund. So here is a pie chart of the general fund revenue of just over 18 million. And you can see sales tax at 9.2 million makes up 51%. And then followed by, looks like the vehicle license fees at 11%, and other various tax revenues. Here are the top 10 revenue sources for the general fund. Again, sales tax at 51%, vehicle license fees at 11%, and then trickling down to property taxes, development services, department revenue, TOT taxes, and then that fire protection tax.
Do you expect the police grants to continue?
I think on the next, might be the next
Oh, I'm
slide,
sorry.
I will talk about that. These are just kind of what make up some of the other revenue sources of the general fund, just some business license tax, miscellaneous revenue, passport revenue. Here, you'll see at the bottom there, so this is a comparison from our mid-year 24-25 budget estimates to what we have in the 25-26 budget. So we do have we're showing a pretty large variance in sales tax. However, most of that is because we did see a dip in our 24-25 Bradley Burns sales tax.
What is that?
Bradley Burns is the original 1%, the base, the 1% that
Right.
the city received. And then we now additionally have the district transactions tax, which is Measure S. So we track them separately. But the Bradley Burns portion did drop in 24-25 because there was a correction to the county pools relating to the Amazon fulfillment centers in Kern County. And so there was corrections that hit all the cities, including Tehachapi. And so we did have to revise our estimates down this last year. And then now, when you jump back up to what they would have been, added with a little bit of increase for Measure S, that is why this variance of 458,000 exists.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other revenue sources there, just kind of slow growth, what we're seeing. Interest income, I am showing a reduction in 50,000. It's been expected for a while now that the Fed would be continuing to cut interest rates. They have already cut once, maybe twice, and they're holding right now. But I think it's imminent that it's expected that there will be additional rate cuts next year. So that limits a little bit in how much we can invest. So I'll continue to do my best to earn as much as we can. And then that bottom variance you see there in the police grants and revenue. The reason for that is we do get a COPS grant, and so there's a baseline of 100,000 on the COPS grant, and then there is a growth component above that the city has been receiving each year. However, that is something that can go away in any year from the state, and so we typically budget conservatively with that, and we just go with that 100,000 base each year, and then we adjust it mid-year once we know that we are receiving the growth.
Because on 2 slides up, it showed it at 224,000 that we had, and that was actual dollars that we.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a, I'm at the graph, am I going ahead? The revenue graph? Oh, okay, I am.
Further back?
No.
No, she's
Okay.
going
Oh,
ahead.
okay.
The next slide.
Oh, okay.
Can I ask a question now?
Sure.
Okay. So 2023-24, there is a peak. And 24-25, the sales tax has come down. And I mean, a lot of times, I mean, I did the same because we are not done yet, 24-25. You're probably not gonna recognize whole sales tax until like September for current year. So is that because of your being conservative, or is there something in?
That is the county pool correction.
Oh, that
so you
was
can see the
it.
large increase
Oh,
up
that's
to
right, yeah.
23-24 was Measure S.
Yeah.
However, even the Measure S that hit that year. So we had one quarter in 22-23 because it was effective April 1.
Yeah, that's right.
However, there were some retailers that were late in their reporting. And so what happened is we ended up receiving a little bit of that quarter's worth that would have been 22-23. We received it in 23-24. So 23-24 was probably a little bit higher than it would normally be.
Okay.
And then you also then had the dip at mid-year for 24-25 because of that county correction for the Amazon Fulfillment Center. And so then we're going back up to 25-26 now is probably where we realistically think we would be.
Okay.
Just out of pure curiosity, would you explain this Amazon and the pool just briefly, why that, there was some correction or how the money is spent?
If I remember exactly. So it had to do with where the fulfillment center is in that city, or I believe it may have been in county unincorporated.
By the airport there?
I'm not sure where, but it had to do with the way it was first reported. The sales tax went into the county pool and then got distributed to all the different cities.
Okay.
But then when they did the correction, they said, no, it should not have gone into the pool. It should have gone directly to, either it was in the city or if it was directly in Kern County unincorporated, should have gone to them. And so then they had to correct all of that and offset everyone's sales tax with that correction.
Okay.
So that's why we have a little bit less in our current fiscal year.
All right, thank you very much.
And it appears that the majority of our revenues are just flatlined. They're just consistent. They haven't dropped, they haven't increased, they're just flatlined.
And that's what you can see over time, just kind of slow growth, unless something like a new revenue like Measure S, which was
Right.
sales tax.
Right, thank God for Measure S.
Then we'll go into, you can kind of see the same kind of lines, but on each particular revenue source. So again, sales tax, 9.2 million. This is both the Bradley Burns and the Measure S component. And as we discussed, there's a little bit of a decrease from 23-24. And then when you factor in kind of the increase from that little bottom point, you end up with a 5% increase. But going forward, we are showing conservatively just kind of slow growth going forward. Property tax, we've seen kind of a little bit of growth. We did have a jump there in 22-23 to 23-24. I think some of that was the RDA component, and so when we started receiving a little bit more of a pass-through from the RDA funds over the city. And then from there, again, we're just kind of we're projecting 2.9% annual growth going forward.
Now, when homes sell that have been occupied for years and years under the Prop 13, and it's like a $100,000 home, but now they're $300,000 homes. So are we getting more of the older occupied homes that are selling now? Does that impact us at all, or has it always been a?
I don't know what the particulars are. Normally that would show up to us in the supplemental property taxes. And so I don't believe I'm noticing big increases or anything there. I think several years ago, we probably had some large amounts in the supplemental tax bills, but it's just been kind of.
I think the biggest increase is with the new home sales.
Yeah.
And the cost of which those homes now, I mean, they're selling for 550, 600,000. So they're being assessed at a much higher rate than previously built stuff in the last several years. So, but yes, you're right. When any home sold, as long as there's no portability with the tax rate, it's reassessed. So, at the sales value.
Thank you.
Moving on to our TOT tax, our hotel lodging tax. So we have seen a good recovery here. You can see we had a little bit of maybe a COVID recovery, post-COVID recovery, and then a dip again. And then since we've had a new hotel, the Town Place and Suites, and we've seen just continued increases in our TOTs. So going forward again, they'll be conservative, we're just showing up a 4% increase.
And we're pretty low compared to most cities in our percent that we charge for that. But that goes before the taxpayers, and they've always said, we don't want any more taxes, even though it's people coming in that's gonna pay it.
If you go to any other city,
Should be 15%.
You're paying
Yeah.
at least 10, if not more, plus there's probably probably a tourism business improvement
That's right.
district, a tourism tax,
Airport tax.
you know, go to Las Vegas, there's about 14 things on your
14%,
on your
yeah.
hotel bill.
Yeah.
San Luis Obispo's got several, Pismo Beach has at least 4 or 5, you know, whether it's a business improvement district, and, you know, those funds don't necessarily go to a city's general fund, they're used for tourism marketing and that sort of thing, but all that stuff, those other special funds can be voted in by the business owners. If they want to create like a tourism business improvement district, they can kind of sell, but the city would still run the fund, but that doesn't become general fund money. But yeah, most of the TOTs are well over 10% in the state.
So at 8.3, we're a deal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A bargain, I should say.
I think are we 8? 8, yeah,
We're at
8% is our, the 8.3 was the increase from 23,
Oh,
24.
okay, right.
But
But the flat rate is.
yes, our TOT is 8%.
Historic Dallas is 22%.
Yeah.
Where?
Historic Dallas.
Oh my God. And I'm sure the Anaheim is like 14% also.
Yeah.
Vehicle license fees, we're at over $2 million now annually. This one, years ago, this is received in the form of property tax now, and so it's not actually based on the amount of vehicle license fees paid. There was a base that was established several years ago, and then it goes up or down based on our assessed value. So we have had assessed value growth over the last few years, and that's why you can see there's a 7.7% increase since 23-24. But we do remain conservative going forward, and we're just projected 2% increase with our assessed valuation affecting this vehicle license fee.
We're done with the triple flips and all that other stuff, right?
For now.
For now.
We'll see in the future, we've got a slide on the general fund challenges and.
Oh, okay.
Moving on to the general fund expenditure side, so 17.6 million. We tried to break down the personnel costs here. We did find an error here. Actually, it was pointed out by a former finance director for the city of Tehachapi. That police personnel number, that is actually the total police expenditure number. So the personnel number is actually $5,521,871, and that is 31%. And then the non-police department personnel number is actually $3,801,344 at 22%. Again, this just kind of gives you a snapshot of the different types of expenditures for the general fund.
Is, when we talk about our police department, as it stands right now though, I mean, because it used to be an enormous part of our general fund was taken by police and fire, correct? It's not as much of the general fund, correct?
Well, I don't know
Very
if I would
close.
say it's as much. It's still, and you'll see that in the next couple slides.
Okay.
Here you can see kind of the percentage then by department.
Yeah.
And so when we look at public safety and we add the fire component and the police component, then that is at 50% for next year. And that's what Corey talked about earlier about, best practice is often looked at as 50% of your general fund expenditures for public safety.
Yeah.
And then if you kind of fast forward this, we've provided this then if you go out into the 5th year in 29-30, you see because that fire contract has continued to increase, or what we're projecting it to be, that's now up at 13%. You add that with the police at 41%, and now our public safety percentage is at 54%.
Yeah. But I thought we were at 70, above that before, many years ago. I'd have to go back. That's okay.
Yeah, I don't recall that, but.
It could have been if the revenues weren't as high.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
And then here is our 5-year kind of snapshot of the general fund. We give you an actuals year of 23-24, followed by what our mid-year 24-25 budget was, and then the next year's budget and 4 preliminary years afterwards. We have our main revenues, and then followed by our expenditure categories. But if I could point you to the yellow row there, that's surplus slash deficit. So you can see in our mid-year, we were showing a deficit of a little over 4 million. That was primarily we were using reserves to pay for the street rehab Measure S projects. We had one that was originally budgeted in 24-25, and then at mid-year, if you recall, we moved up the 25-26 street project into 24-25.
Right.
And so that's why we were using 4 million in 24-25 year. Next year in 25-26, we show a surplus of 392,000. And then in 26-27, we do show a deficit there of 1.1 million. That is primarily because of a $2 million Measure S paving project that we had budgeted in that fiscal year. And so if you did not have that, we would be in a surplus, so we'll just be using reserves for that project. And then going on in the last 3 years, we do continue to show surpluses each year. So kudos to the departments for looking at their budgets and helping us make sure that we can maintain that having surpluses going out 5 years.
What's the overhead allocation? It's always, let's see here.
Yes, so we do, basically, we allocate, there's a lot of staff that there's probably indirect costs essentially, and staff that work on to the enterprise funds and all that. Some of it we do directly allocate to those funds, but then there's this indirect allocation for even some of the operating expenditures, supplies and all that, that we then apply. It comes out as a credit to the general fund and then gets applied to the other enterprise funds and special revenue funds.
Yeah. It's a big number.
So that they share their costs. And so then this is similar to last year as well, our general fund challenges. Again, we're in the midst of this massive fire contract increases over 6 years. We continue to have a priority for public safety, and that means recruiting and retaining the vacant positions at police department. And then as Corey discussed, trying to maintain that balance, that 50% threshold with PD and fire, along with our other general fund departments. As we saw on the slide earlier, our insurance premiums go up each year, so overall we have an increase of 12% in next fiscal year. There is this kind of unknown again of what kind of unfunded mandates or cuts or anything that may come about from the state budget situation. So in the past, there's been raids of municipalities' general funds with eliminating redevelopment agency, triple flip, borrowing from property tax. With the current state of the state budget, that's always a concern. We continue to have those subsidies to the landscape and lighting districts and to the airport to support their operations. And then there's still a continued threat of a recession in the future. Inflation has remained high, and there's always the possibility that there will be decreased spending and that we will see lower revenues.
On the fire contract, we're in good shape because of Measure S, that we can cover this enormous increase. We're covering it, and the taxpayer said, yes, we voted to cover this. But there are some cities that they don't have a Measure S. Are we paying a premium in Tehachapi because we can cover it compared to other small cities?
It's a great question. We can't ever get a straight answer whether or not, take for example, the city of Maricopa was given a fire contract that was larger than their general fund in general. We have never been able to get an answer whether or not they paid a dime on that contract.
And they said, well, you're still gonna have fire service.
Correct. We never quite got a clear answer. I know there are other cities that are paying some more. In the case of the city of Shafter, for example, they've got some stuff going on, but they want to build they need to build a new fire station, and so they're getting quotes for a second fire station because their city limits have grown. Yes. So there's, they've got a larger bill because of the fire station need and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think it's fairly balanced, but some of those questions I couldn't tell you whether or not Maricopa's paying or whether or not McFarland ever got caught up, because at one point McFarland just said, we're not gonna pay. We can't pay. And so, yeah, this is one of those things when you're.
We've had those roundtables with the county.
Yeah, when you're.
You can't get really.
When you budget appropriately and responsibly, I mean, you pay your bills. Yeah, and that's what we're doing. So, yeah.
And it's not like we wish any harm to the cities who can't pay, but it seems like we're paying a premium amount for Kern County Fire.
And we don't know what it holds after this contract's up. We will renegotiate. Not sure what that cost recovery model looks like at that point.
And we're still looking at options at all the times.
It's always out there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's hard to do. I mean, it's hard to even do your own department though, even at 2.7 million.
Yeah. When
the contract matures, to try to start something from scratch, it's very challenging. And we're remote enough to where it's hard to. There's really no contract options.
You can't contract with someone else.
For example, this was a conversation, just almost half joking, with the city managers in Bakersfield about, hey, why don't you just cover us? And their point was, not only are you geographically remote, however, we have urban firefighters in Bakersfield. They don't do grass fires and that kind of stuff. He said, so the firefighting model and even the training we have in Bakersfield is different than what you guys have in a rural area with wildfire risk and that sort of thing. They don't have helicopters, that kind of stuff. So that was, the points, just our geography makes it challenging as well, because we're 30 minutes from anything on either side, and then, just our geography with the type of fires as well. So, yeah, I mean, it was more of just a, kidding around him to see what he would say, but he made a good point when he said, yeah, we're not trained for that type of stuff. So we are in that, there's not a ton of options because of the cost and just our geography.
We're still considered a rural community, even though, okay.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
So that's it for general fund, so I'll pause here if you have any additional questions on general fund before we go further. Okay. All right, we'll dive into the enterprise funds, capital project funds, and then some special revenue funds. So starting with water, water sales revenue, we're budgeting at $3.3 million. That is about a 16% increase from our 24-25 numbers, and that is primarily due to the new water rates that were just approved after the rate study. Our water connection fee revenue also shows an increase. We're just projecting, again, conservatively based on new connections each year. And that same number is used to project the water entitlement fee revenues. Here is a pie chart of the water fund revenue. You can see again, 87% of that is from the water rates. We do show developer contribution next year. That is for the pressure zone boundary project, where about half of that $500,000 project will be funded by developer contribution. Do also want to point out that this total number here, the 3.8 million, is not going to match when we get into the spreadsheet document that we see there. And that's really an accounting entry. There is a $500,000 difference for an elimination of transfers in and transfer outs. It's just because when we show between the different funds within the water fund, we show a transfer out and then a transfer in, and it can look like we're double counting if we include both of them multiple times. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing, but just wanted to point that out that it will not match in the future sheets. Here's just a little line graph, again showing that water sales revenue. So you can see it was hovering about over 2.5 million. We had some CPI adjustments there, but then now with the new water rates, we are seeing increased revenue going forward, and that will help offset our operating costs, our capital expenditures, and establish the reserve. Our water connection fee history, you can see for the most part, the average has probably been right around the 61,000 that we're budgeting going forward. We did have a little peak there of 156,000 And I believe that was when the K. O'Neill Homes started. On the expense side, a little over $5 million. Here's a breakdown: personnel at 37%, operating expenditures at 24%, and then capital purchases at 39%.
Could you go back to the slide before?
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna always, I shouldn't say always, typically budget for, like, the 5 years out, you're at 61,410. You don't expect necessarily, and if we do get homes built, then you'll have the extra to cover it.
Correct. We would typically look at mid-year, and if our mid-year has come in more than that, or we know for sure that there are new developments coming that year, then maybe we would factor them in at that point.
But for budgeting, conservatively, we might not get homes built that year.
Correct.
There could be products that they can't afford, they just stop building or whatever. Okay, thank you.
And here are some of the major water fund expenses. So just some meter replacements, we typically budget that each year. The banked water we discussed earlier, if it's available to us. That Snyder Mojave Wells transmission line, $850,000. $100,000 for the Highline tank coating. And then the big $500,000 for reestablishing the pressure zone boundaries, and half of that is funded by a developer contribution.
What is that exactly? When you say boundaries?
You have to default to
Is this an accounting
No,
reestablishment,
this
or is
is
this
a-
actual valves?
This is actual physical infrastructure
That's what I
in the
meant.
field, yeah. So we're fortunate in the city in that we have an elevation difference between the south side and downtown, or the north side of the city. And so we take advantage of that elevation to create pressure for the connections. So there's multiple different pressure zones throughout the city based on those elevations. So as the, if we didn't have that, the people at the bottom of the hill would have huge water pressure, too much. It would
And hundreds of people
blow up
wouldn't
your
have to-
water line. So what we do is we have pressure reducing stations strategically throughout town so that we have a fairly consistent water pressure for different areas of town, right? There's, with some of the new development that's come on, it makes sense for us to adjust some of those. So we're actually going to be removing a couple of the pressure reducing station valves, and we're going to be installing a couple new ones to help adjust, increase the pressure on some of the areas that are a little marginal, and then also help accommodate some of the other areas that are being developed or could be developed in the near future.
So that's what you mean by the developer covering a lot of this cost, or some of it, or?
Yeah, so
half of it?
in this case, for these adjustments, one of the developers already is in progress. A lot of this in this area is being driven by that development, but there are other developments in the future that will also benefit from this. So, so we came up with this scheme so that half of it's paid by this developer and then half is paid by a future developer.
Great, thank you.
All right, here is the 5-year snapshot of the water operating fund. And so you can see that there is next year a deficit of 1.1 million, and that's primarily because of the large capital project with that Snyder Well transmission line. But you can see then going forward, we do have surpluses as the water rates increase, and we don't have a significant number in the capital purchase row. Then we do have surpluses that then help the fund get into a positive and eventually have a reserve. Here's the 5-year snapshot for the development fee fund side. So this is for the water mitigation and their water entitlement fees, as well as the water capacity fees. And you can see there that the other revenue, that is kind of the $250,000 development contribution, and then the 500,000 for the pressure zone boundaries. And then this is the overall, we combine the operating and the development fees funds. This is the overall water fund summary. And again, deficit in 25-26 due to large capital purchases, and then surpluses in the remaining years as the water rates increase.
Hamid, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
So on a year 27-28, there is a 650,000 budgeted. Do we know what that is? In
Yes.
water?
That is for, Dawn, you may have to help me with explaining what it is, but I wrote down, it's the Tehachapi Boulevard Pipeline, Snyder to Denison, that we had budgeted in 27-28 year.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
But we're still positive on the surplus side, by a little.
Yes. And that
But it just shows
and that
you
is-
you're budgeting so that you're not deficit spending constantly, all trying to play catch up. So you're comfortable, you get it built up, and then you've got these big projects that you can cover it.
Correct, and then and that's what the key, I think, to the water rate study is, and the new rates, is that it allows you to make sure that you are covering your operating costs. It allows you to budget for capital replacement each fiscal year, and establishing a reserve, so that if there is a main line or something that has to be replaced, that you have those funds to do it.
So some people could argue, well, look at all the money that's sitting there because the rates are going up, but it's being planned to be using it for a major project 2 or 3 years down the road. And then you're not taking out a loan or a bond to cover those projects. We're doing it in-house, which is huge.
Or just the Denison main line from, what was that, last year? And that thing kept breaking, and it was enough was enough. It wasn't
was
budgeted
headed
for another,
down.
yeah,
Mhm.
wasn't budgeted for another couple of years, but we just were able to go fix it.
Yeah.
And replace it, so.
In-house, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, water was lost, a lot of water was lost on that project before it was fixed.
yeah, absolutely.
So for the water fund, I was kind of concerned when I looked at the overall water fund summary. All the way to fourth budget year is negative, and finally, we're catching up on a 5th year. The benefit of doing a 5-year projection, we'll be able to see, we will be catch up, so.
That was really the design in the water rate study. That was exactly the plan, is that over the next 5 years, we would build that reserve back.
Very good, thank you.
All right, now onto the sewer fund, or the wastewater enterprise fund. So again, here with our sewer service charges, we are projecting a 20% increase next year, and that is from the new sewer rates going into effect on July 1 after the rate study. And then similar to water, on the connection fee side, we're just kind of using a base, and that results in about a 10% increase compared to last fiscal year. Here's a pie chart of the 3.6 million of sewer fund revenue. You see 88% of it is from the sewer service charge rates. The loan proceeds, or it says loan proceeds, it's really just loan repayments for when the sewer fund loaned to the facility fees fund to cover the police
Oh, okay,
department
I was
building.
gonna ask.
So that's just the repayment that comes from the facility funds, and it's about 150,000
Yeah,
per
okay.
year.
Has that got a few more years to go?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But we were able to do something in-house versus a bond to build this facility.
Correct, correct. Yeah, the sewer portion of the loan is being paid first. There's also a $2 million loan from the general fund that also went towards that, so that is remaining $2 million.
Yeah.
Once the sewer is paid back, sewer fund is paid back, then the facility fees will go to pay back the general fund.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Similar to water, you can see the sewer fees. In the past, they were just going up by whatever the CPI was each year. But now with the new sewer rates, we're seeing a little bit more in increased revenues that will again help support the operating costs and capital expenditures, as well as maintaining the reserve. And just like water, on the sewer connection and development fees side, you can see we're projecting going forward just kind of a base of about 156,000. We did have that spike in 23-24 to 390,000, and that's also based on the Keio Namian development. Pie chart for the sewer fund expenditures, so just under 3.2 million, operating expenditures at 42%, personnel at 47%, and then capital at 11% for next fiscal year. Some of the major expenses in the sewer fund, you have some shop improvements at 10,000, GIS equipment, the biosolids handling system, I believe that's a multi-year project, and then truck replacement in the airport landings that they pay every year.
On the GIS equipment, is that something for valves and stuff that we have, or?
It's a computer it's basically, GIS is a computer mapping software.
Mapping.
So currently, like, our water lines, our sewer lines, they're all on base maps that are just static maps.
Mm-hmm.
These actually allow, they're layered maps, so you can, where's your water mains, where's your sewer, main trunk lines, all that stuff. So you can, it's really the way that you should be managing these assets and these lines. And so we've identified somebody in Public Works who's fantastic at this stuff. And so already started instituting it with some landscaping stuff, and so this is the next step to really modernize where our infrastructure's at and how to pull it up quickly to understand just what size line is there.
How deep it is, so when you're excavating, you don't hit the line,
Still might hit some surprises once in a while because that predates us.
Yeah, it's part of our asset management effort going forward to know exactly what we have, where it is, and the condition of it. So, yeah, it's a Geographic Information System is what GIS stands for, and it's basically a surveying equipment.
Yeah.
So that we can go survey that exact location and everything.
I think it's a very valuable expense to pay, yes.
Yeah, and that is actually this is the sewer fund portion of it, but the actual expense is distributed between Public Works General Fund and water and sewer.
Right.
So it's a shared expense.
Thank you.
Is this the same system that'll notify you if there's a potential leak as well? Or is that a different system?
No, it has nothing to do with that.
There's the five-year snapshot of the sewer operating fund. So you can see here that for the most part we do show operating surpluses each fiscal year. In 27, 28, 28, 29, we do have some capital purchases there that result in an operating deficit in those years. But overall cash is healthy in the sewer operating fund.
So when you're saying a deficit, it's just meaning we've got more expenses due to capital improvements than we're taking in for the year.
For that
But
year.
the bottom line at the very end, it says that the account is healthy to be able to cover those years when we have the blips.
Correct.
Do you have more expense that year than revenue that year?
Correct, and that's where you want to have that fund balance in place, because if you do identify that there is a large capital project that needs to be done, yes, your expenditures in that year are going to be significant revenues, but you do have those reserves on hand to take care of those capital expenditures.
And with our floating 5-year budget, as we've been doing for a lot of years now, it just gives you a good feel for what we can do, because these years seem to click by.
It's the main number that matters, is really that, cash balance.
At the bottom.
And so that's, the same goes for general fund or any of the enterprise funds, but general fund, if you notice on that, it was the same way. There were a few capital projects and there's a deficit next year because of a big project, but that cash balance is still very healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you were to take out the capital line item and then just purely look at your revenues versus your operating costs, if you were then to have deficits there, then that shows that there's a structural deficit.
Right.
And that is when you definitely would need some kind of, boost in revenue or cut in those operating expenditures.
Right.
There's the 5-year snapshot for the sewer development fee funds. So in here, for most years, we do have a surplus, but there is in 26-27 an increase in costs there. And that, I believe, looks like it's for a $1 million clarifier project that we had budgeted in that fiscal year. But again, the sewer development fees actually do have a good, healthy balance there. And so that project has been identified to use some of those reserves in fiscal year 26-27.
Are there certain things that you have to use this fund for? You can't just use it for
Capacity.
operating, you know,
Right.
day to
Capacity.
day.
It is for capacity.
And future capacity.
Correct.
Yeah. And this is the fund that we discussed, not this fund, but the scenario we talked about at the last meeting, that the existing folks that are on the system are not subsidizing new development. The developer fees fund those future expansions. Even though we don't need it right today, we know we're gonna need larger pipes or bigger facilities down the line, and this will allow us to cover it versus having the homeowners today covering, you know, subsidizing.
Correct.
Thank you.
And then the overall summary, so for both operating and the development fees for the sewer fund. And so, again, surpluses most years, except for 26-27 and 28-29, when we do have some increased capital items. But again, bottom line, ending cash for the sewer fund is very healthy with reserves that can help cover those capital purchases. All right, we go into the airport fund now. So in our airport fund, we're always going to see that our total revenues match our expenses because in this case, the airport fund has continued to have a deficit in their operating costs. And so the general fund then subsidizes with the transfer, and we basically match the expenditures to the revenues. Pie chart of the revenue sources for the airport's operations. So fuel sales is the primary revenue source. You have some hangar fees, property leases, and then you can see that that general fund subsidy is $322,000 for next year. On the expense side, fuel purchases at 36%, personnel costs at 34%, operating at 30%, and then some small capital purchases of under 1% of $5,000. On the 5-year snapshot of the operating fund, again, you can see that there is a general fund subsidy line under the revenues, and it hovers around anywhere from 322 down to 283,000 next year, at a peak at 425,000 in 28-29. Without that, we would have deficits each year, but because of that subsidy line item to transfer in, we zero out the surplus or deficit each year.
Why is that such a high subsidy, 28, 29? Because we're expecting some.
That should be related because of some of the capital projects and the match for those capital projects.
Yeah.
So we'll see it here coming up.
Okay.
Let me see, right here, you can see in 28-29, there's a $2.8 million project for the runway rehab. And so out of that, 90% is funded by the federal grant, another 4.5% by the state grant, but then there is that transfer in coming from the general fund for the matching portion of $154,000.
Okay.
So when you add that $154,000 on top of what the normal operating deficit is, that's why that year
That
had a
higher subsidy, but we're getting a value of $2.8 million from the federal, hopefully. Or is that still in the works, or is that revenue secure at the moment?
You never know with the FAA.
That's where I'm going with
It's
this.
on the books, it has been. for quite a while, but when we roll up to that year, they could say, no, we're not doing it this year.
That could be
You're gonna push it
changed.
off another year.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, all right, but we're prepared.
The other project there in 2627, that is the diagonal taxi lane reconstruction. Hopefully I have that correct. And so again, same funding mechanism, 90% from the FAA, 4.5% from the state, and then 5.5% matching component from the general fund.
now we are expecting though that year that we may actually only end up with a 0.5% match. If the state, so the FAA plans to do a 95%, and if the state still keeps their 4.5%, then we may end up with a 0.5%. So that cost could go down quite a bit.
Okay, and how many tenants do we have out there now that are leasing property?
So we have 88 hangars, but I think we have 83 that are releasing the hangars. But we also have land lease, cell tower leases. So
And then we also have the enterprise or the other non-aviation
Yes.
businesses that pay leases.
correct.
Is the AT&T ever building?
We'll let you know.
I mean, I changed it to my carrier, so I couldn't wait.
We're hoping so. Still fingers crossed. We're still working with them, so.
Did she ask about AT&T?
Yes.
I was gonna,
Yeah.
so this year?
We're still working with them. I'm not promising anything.
Oh, gosh, all right.
All right, and then here's the 5-year snapshot of the overall airport fund summary, so both operating and projects. And again, 0 for the surplus and deficit, even though you can see that there is a negative cash at the bottom. We will eventually do an accounting entry to zero that out. We're waiting right now because there have been reimbursements on the current project, the taxiway relocation. So rather than write that off and then get money in, we're just waiting to let that settle, and then we'll do some accounting entries to clean it up.
I was gonna ask, is that the general fund share? Okay, so that's good, thank you.
That's basically the.
Because I'm sure that there was a good reason that you left it there, because we usually don't, so that's why.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be an accounting entry that we will clean that up.
Good deal, thank you.
Okay, now going into the refuse enterprise fund. Fortunately, we went through the Prop 218 process and adjusted the rates this last year. And so this was a fund that was trending in the negative direction. You can see now though, we do have surpluses in each year, going out 5 years, with a little bit of a reserve balance at the bottom. This does include a 4.79% increase that will go into effect for the 25-26 year. This is our litter mitigation fund. We receive funding now from Kern County for land use fees, and that is to help trash pickup and litter mitigation. So we allocate some percentages of some of our public works staff to pick up the trash and mitigate the litter. And so even though you can see that we do show deficits in the 5 years, that is primarily because we did receive this revenue back in 23-24 and a little bit in 22-23. And then we started beginning to implement the program and allocate afterwards. So we're kind of catching up, trying to use up that fund balance. And then eventually we may have to shorten up some of those allocations and then try to match what our annual revenues are. But right now we're trying to use up some of the fund balance. This is our transit fund summary. So this is for our dial-a-ride operation. You can see the main two revenue sources. Well, we have either Article 4, LTF, Local Transportation Fund, or Article 6.5, which is the STA Fund, State Transit Assistance. You have to be able to qualify to use those STA funds. And in 24-25, we did qualify for it. If you do not qualify, every 3 years you are allowed to take that, so that's why you'll see that 216,000 in 27-28 under Transit Article 6.5. By utilizing those funds, it frees up the LTF funds more to be used towards our streets and roads claims.
Why is it on a 3-year cycle? Why can't you balance it out?
It's just the way that the statute is written. There's certain factors that you have to qualify for. It could be based on what the annual CPI was. I think there's some other qualifying factors based on your expenses. So it's just something that, yeah.
However, good thing is the money doesn't go away.
Correct.
It sits in the city's account.
Correct.
So when we are qualified for that, then we can catch it all.
Yes, yes. All right, and then we have some remaining special revenue funds. So again, this just kind of gives a snapshot, starting with our SB1, road maintenance funds, gas tax, streets and roads, and then all the way down to some miscellaneous special revenue funds. We're just showing the 5-year expenditure budgets along with the total of the 5-year revenue side. And then continue on, the way we track our capital projects is we try to create a fund to account for those. And so these are the capital projects over 5 years. Right now, we're just going out 2 years, so you can see where we discussed the Valley and Mill Gap closure. There is $200,000 for engineering and design this next fiscal year, but then $2.7 million in 26-27. Same with the Tucker and Highland Roundabout, design and engineering next year, and then $3.1 million in 26-27. And then further down, Fund 369, that is that Measure S paving project that's funded by the general fund, $2 million in 26-27.
And the Tucker and Highline roundabout is our share with the county. I mean, we're sharing that cost of the total thing. This is our portion.
Correct.
Yeah, that's actually the total project cost. And those costs are actually going to be paid, shared with the county, but also both portions come out of our traffic mitigation fee fund.
Right.
So there is no actual cost. There's a small matching portion, but the vast majority of the cost is coming from the traffic mitigation fee fund.
Okay.
So it doesn't come out of the general fund.
Very good. Thank you for the explanation.
Here is a snapshot of the various funds that we use to track our landscape and lighting districts. And so you can see that there is a line item, the third row down under revenues, the general fund subsidy, that shows how much is needed for those various districts to cover their expenditures outside of what we can recover from the property tax levy. And then we have 2 drainage basin assessment districts, or drainage benefit assessment districts. One is active, the Tehachapi Boulevard, parcel map 11353. And then the Industrial Parkway, this one is no longer, we're not levying this anymore. And there is a project next year for a drainage project there at Industrial Parkway. And so we plan on using our existing fund balance there towards that project.
Why is that, this district is going to be eliminated, or is that going to be gone?
It will be eliminated afterwards. So this is where the new, it's where the new Caltrans is.
maintenance yard.
Oh, okay, so it's no longer, okay,
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
we stopped levying it, but we did have some reserves there that had been from the prior collections for drainage benefit, drainage basin maintenance and all that. So that's where we're going to plan on using the fund balance.
Good.
And that is it for the budget presentation. Along with adoption of the budget, this agenda item also also includes a resolution for the salary plan for all of our position classifications for the city. And it also approves job descriptions for utility maintenance technician, part-time maintenance worker, seasonal maintenance worker, senior building official, and intern. And so I'll pause for any questions you may have.
I don't have any question, but I just wanted to thank you, because it's a lot of work and it's a tremendous process.
I know.
For everybody involved, every department, every single person in finance department, and as always, it came out very nicely, and thank you, and please pass my appreciation to your staff.
Okay, do I have any public comments, please?
Thank you, Claudia Elliott. I made some questions as you went through this, because I want to make sure I get it. So overall, it looked like your budget's about $4 million less than last year. So is there is it lots of little reasons, or is there a larger reason?
One that stands out to me would be the airport taxiway relocation project.
That capital?
I believe we had it budgeted about $6 million last year.
Okay.
And so that would just be one that stands out right there to account for that
Okay.
reduction.
Thank you. This is a small question on your personnel budget slide. You had unrepresented and TPOA. So does that mean that TPOA is your only employee union?
No, we do have a public works union as well. That is included. They are receiving